We are privileged to be able to have with us Janel. Janel previously worked at the Hemophilia Federation of America as their advocacy program manager. She has also worked as a public health educator at Johns Hopkins and is currently the quilt and kit manager at the Lutheran World Relief. According to the Hemophilia Foundation of Southern California's executive director, Michelle Kim, Janel is passionate for advocacy and one of the best speakers I've ever seen. Today, Janel will be guiding us through how to tell our stories in order to be better advocates for ourselves. Welcome, Janel, and I'm going to let you take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I really appreciate that introduction. Let's go right to the first slide because it's going to be a recap for part 2 of telling your story. This is what we want to think about. What do I want to accomplish? Always have that in the forefront of your mind. Is the person listening? Make sure that there aren't any distractions that are preventing the person from being able to hear your story. If they're distracted, that means they're not able to listen to you. And if there's something that you can do to mitigate the distractions, that will give you more time to be able to tell them your story. Also important is establishing rapport. If you establish rapport, then you are able to make a connection with someone and they're more likely to remember you. You want to be brief. You don't have to share everything, which we'll get right into next. And then you want to be memorable. What is different about your story than all of the other stories that they've heard? Next slide. So to that point, I want you all to think about, how do I decide what to share? Again, that depends on the audience. Every person doesn't have to hear everything. Next slide. If there's a scenario, and it could be something as simple, I'll take my hair, for example. I have very curly hair. However, if I don't have water or some moisture in my hair daily, it will shrivel to the consistency of a Brillo pad, right? So if I'm going to be that descriptive, if I'm going on a trip to the desert, I want to make sure the person who's organizing the trip and purchasing the supplies knows I need extra water for this trip for my hair, because if I don't have extra water, it will shrivel up like a Brillo pad and it will break off and fly into the wind. Very descriptive, very visual. Now, the clerk at the store does not need to know that my hair will shrivel like a Brillo pad, break off and fly into the wind. So you decide the audience and what you want to accomplish in terms of what you decide to share. Not every person needs to know everything in every situation. So be discerning in the information that you share. Next slide. Now I want to go right into some scenarios that I think are very important, and they come up often. Well, maybe not often, but sometimes they may come up. And I want you all to be thinking about these in addition to the legislative scenario. Here's the situation. You are man or woman in an elevator. You've banged your elbow in the hotel lobby and you're on the elevator. Kids are innocent. 5-year-old walks into the elevator and they see that you have a bulge the size of a grapefruit at the end of your elbow. The kid says, "What happened to your elbow? That looks bad," right? You don't want to say, "Scram, little kid," because, or maybe you do, but the moment for education could go a little something like this. "Oh, I have hemophilia. Have you heard of it?" And this will probably be directed more to their parent than to the kid. The person says no, then you can say, "People are born with it. It means that something is missing from my blood, so I don't heal like everybody else. Luckily, I can take medication now. 20 years ago, I didn't have many choices." Quick 30-second elevator ride. And that pitch is more for an opportunity for you to give some information, to create a partner in learning about hemophilia or bleeding disorders. They don't need to know all the details, but that gives them a snippet where they may want to learn more, and you were the caveat to get that information out there. Next slide. In this scenario, you may have a few more minutes because you're at school, right? "Shanna, there's blood on the back of your pants again. Why does that keep happening?" "Oh, no, that's my Von Willebrand. I was born with it, but I didn't know I had it until last year. my periods are heavy. And as a kid, I used to have nosebleeds. And whenever the tooth fairy came, there was always a lot of blood. The person responds, well, maybe I have it too. You know, I have a lot of heavy blood during my cycle as well. And then the person can respond, maybe you do. You can ask your doctor. One in about every 100 people has von Willebrand's, and it affects both men and women. Education moment. She turned a situation that could have been, horrifying or embarrassing into a learning opportunity. So think about those scenarios. Next slide, please. Here's one where you are, you want to take as much time as you need. One of the things not listed in my bio is that I spent 3 years working in an emergency department. And sometimes you'll have a tech, you'll have a nurse, you'll have a doctor, you'll have a physician's assistant, and not everybody is familiar with bleeding disorders. So you want to make sure in certain scenarios where it can affect you directly with potential criminal charges, that in that scenario, you take as much time as you need to explain what's happening. Here's the scenario. You've taken your child to the emergency department, and then someone comes in and says, ma'am, we've called the social worker to speak with you about all the bruises on your son's legs and arms. You know that they're thinking that there's abuse. They haven't said it, but most likely that is the thought. So the response can either be one of anger or it can be one of education. And here is some language. I appreciate your concern. My son has a bleeding disorder, hemophilia. If they don't immediately say, oh, they know what that is, then you know that's your opportunity to explain what hemophilia is. If they respond, oh, I'm so sorry, then they know what it is, and then you can say, no problem. We usually introduce ourselves at the local hospital, which is something I would always recommend if you are in a community, to make sure that you have that relationship. So if you ever do present and there's an issue, they are already familiar with you. Then you can explain, he fell off a slide and we are visiting friends in this neighborhood, but we wanted to bring him in to make sure there aren't any fractures. That's a scenario where, unfortunate, because you're in a medical facility, if it's an area that is unfamiliar to you, you may be the person who is the educator about bleeding disorders that day, and you will do a great service for other people who may follow the path that you did when they come in the next time. And we'll just hope for better education for our medical providers in all parts of the world so they can recognize it sooner. Last slide, or last scenario slide. Now, I've shared a lot about bleeding disorders and telling your story, but what happens in a job interview? Thank you for meeting me today, Paul. Just throw out a name. Tell me about yourself. Are you going to say, hi, I'm Paul. I was born with hemophilia. And when I was little, I used to have bleeds a lot. But now, because of my factor VIII, I have a great medication and I take it and this is what happens and and I'm severe. And no, Paul, tell me about yourself. Depending on what the job is, I made up a marketing job. This is what you say. I've been in marketing for 10 years and I'm excited about this opportunity because it will allow me to use my website building skills. That's it. There's no need to mention hemophilia in that instance. You want to make sure that your telling of your story fits the circumstance. Sometimes it's necessary to share about your bleeding disorders, and sometimes it isn't, especially in a job scenario, unless you have a direct need to utilize resources through the company human resources where you have to disclose. During the job interview, you want to make sure you focus on your ability to do the work, because as we all know, with the proper medication and treatment, you are someone who would be able to, or the person you love is someone who would be able to function just like everybody else. Next slide. And just to fully recap, always be thinking about, what do I want to accomplish? Is the person listening? Are they distracted, or are they able to fully listen and engage with me? Have I established rapport? Rapport is an opportunity for you to build a relationship. That relationship can be forged in 30 seconds or 1 hour, but just make sure that there is a rapport, because that means that there is an exchange. Be brief, be memorable, and practice some of the scenarios that I mentioned and that we'll mention next.
I thank everybody for taking the time to practice with us today. And thank Janelle for being with us last week and this week. Want to let you know that we're going to get these slides up really quickly on our website, so that those folks that are going to participate in Legislative Day who didn't get a chance to join us on these calls will have the opportunity to watch these and hopefully learn a little bit more about telling their stories and learn from the stories and the scenarios that we did today. So thank you so much for participating. Again, thank you to Janelle. We do have Legislative Days coming up in April, so watch for more information. We will be putting out some information about how you can join us by contacting your assembly member and senator, even if you are not participating in the live meetings. There's going to be a way for you to share your story and lobby on the issues that we will be lobbying on in our meetings. And I did want to just briefly thank the supporters of our public policy and advocacy webinar series, Takeda, BioMarin, HF Healthcare, and Sanofi Genzyme. So thank you so much for joining us today. And please, check out the website for the other webinars from the past, if that's helpful information to you. And we hope that you all have a great afternoon. So thank you so much. And thank you again, Janelle, and bye-bye. We'll see you all soon.